So Psalm 33 states, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." How does a country choose its God? A collective group of people choose their God when they share a set of values and principles. These values and principles will guide decision-making in many arenas important to the welfare of the people of the country and the welfare of the shared world it exists in. Each of us as individuals can be committed to obedience to the Lord's commandments and living a life of wise kindness for the people around us, in spite of the personal sacrifices it may involve. Similarly, a country can be committed to a belief in supporting spiritual, moral, and civil order, both within its boundaries and with other countries with which it shares the world. A country can be committed to wisely caring for the welfare of human beings, both within its borders and beyond. The teachings for the new church have several powerful ideas about our relationship to our country. They define a number of areas of behavior that are important expressions of love of country. One of the ideas that the Lord has given us is that loving our neighbor does not just mean loving individual human beings, and does not just mean loving those near us or who are related to us. The Lord calls us to recognize that a community of people we're living in is a higher and more important degree of the neighbor than an individual. We should be willing to accept certain sacrifices or personal disadvantages if we believe that the essential welfare of the community will benefit from it. A still higher and more important degree of the neighbor is one's country. We should be willing to accept certain sacrifices and disadvantages coming not just to individuals, but even to communities within the country if we believe the essential welfare of the country will benefit from it. The following is a more extended quotation from the passage that served as today's recitation. People who love their country and out of goodwill do good to it will in the next life love the Lord's kingdom. For there the Lord's kingdom becomes their country. And people who love the Lord's kingdom love the Lord, since the Lord is the all in all of his kingdom. For strictly speaking, the Lord's kingdom is the goodness and truth which resides with the inhabitants of that kingdom, and which they receive from the Lord. Now, the Lord calls us not to love a country from its external attributes alone. We're actually not called to love it merely because it's the one we were born in. We are to love it for the sake of the good qualities and true ideas fostered by it. One direct application of this principle can be seen in the following situation. If a genuinely good human being from the United States was asked, you have a choice of helping a person from your country, or one from Spain, or one from India, who are you going to help? A genuinely good person would observe that he or she did not yet know any basis on which to choose who to help. That genuinely good person would want to know the qualities of the three people who could be helped. In the Teachings for the New Church, the book, The Doctrine of Charity, defines this concept with these words. Birth does not make one more the neighbor than another, not even mother and father, Neither does education. These are from natural good. Nor does nearness of abode nor relationship make one person more the neighbor than another, nor therefore one's native country. This is to be loved according to the quality of its good. It then goes on to state specifically, I can love all in the universe according to their religion, not more those in my own country than in other kingdoms, not more those in Europe than in Africa. I love a Gentile more than a Christian if he lives well according to religion. If from the heart he worships God and says, I will not do this evil thing because it's against God. We are to love another individual, a community, or a country based on its quality of good. But the Lord wants us to recognize that even if we feel suspicious or somewhat alienated from the quality of good of the community or country in which we live, we're still called to care for it to the extent that we're capable to do so. Consider the following observation, again from the doctrine of charity. For example, if I fundamentally disagree with the spiritual principles in my country, am I to love this country or the country where I was born because of its spiritual good? I cannot. Nor with respect to its moral and civil good, so far as this depends for its existence upon spiritual good. But so far as it does not depend on this, I can, even if that country hates me. Thus, I must not in hatred regard it as an enemy, nor as an adversary, but must still love it, doing it no injury, consulting its good, so far as it is good for it, not consulting it in a way that I confirm it in its own false principles and evil values. A person who cares most about what is good and true looks to this as a powerful driving force. The teachings for the new church compare this to the patriotism that leads a soldier to be willing to sacrifice in battle. When the eyes of genuinely good people are fixed on what is right and good, they are like soldiers fighting in battle for their country. During it, they give no thought at all to their life, nor thus to their status or assets in the world, which compared with what they are doing are of no importance to them. But those who prioritize self and the world at the top are the kind of people who do not even see what is right and good, because their eyes are fixed on themselves and on gain. The document we most associate with the 4th of July, the Declaration of Independence, concludes with the words, "And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." Those who signed that document could have been well aware that if their efforts failed, they would be found guilty as traitors, would have been put to death, had their property confiscated, and had their names go down in infamy. If they had prioritized self and worldly reward at the top, it's unlikely that they would have had anything to do with those steps that led this country into existence. Or consider George Washington being willing to lead the Continental Army. He was like a coach of a poorly equipped, poorly trained amateur team going up to the best equipped, best trained professional team that he could possibly face. And yet he was willing to do it because he believed in the cause. Our relationship to our country is not a simple matter. As the second lesson stated, everything we've ever thought about our country is linked together in our mind. Certainly, there's a huge variety of these thoughts, from those of childhood and youth through many states of our adult life. For those of us in the United States, consider how many times you've said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, or you've sung the national anthem. Think of the times you've heard of people who have sacrificed so that we might have the freedoms and opportunities we do. How many times have you heard or read Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address? As Lincoln considered the cemetery at Gettysburg they were establishing for those who had died at the battlefield, he said, "We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather than to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so nobly advanced. It's rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth." While we can think of many positive things about the country we love, perhaps you also remember some of the darker things you may associate with this country. Things that we regret occurring and want to do what we can to prevent their recurrence. The Lord encourages us to consider the pattern of thoughts and memories we hold for our country. It will be similar to our pattern of thoughts about many other parts of our lives. The question is, what are we making most important? What are we willing to stand up for, to work for, to sacrifice for? It may be daunting to think that we can personally do only a small amount to influence the values and principles by which our country is run. But we can take heart from the Lord's power to multiply our efforts, just as He multiplied a young boy's few fish and loaves to feed thousands. All we need to ask ourselves of is to do our part. The Lord calls us to a commitment to the welfare of our country that is deep, powerful, and potentially wonderfully rewarding to us. A person does not get this love of country without the spiritual battles against powerful self-interest and worldly desire. Our lives have been blessed because we live in a country that has had many people who are willing to sacrifice so that we might be here today with the opportunities that lie before us. May we, from gratitude, do our part to wisely love this country, and so grow in a deep love that one day may be transferred to the Lord's kingdom. Amen.